we are here, to discuss a very exciting topic today, and we have subject matter experts on corporate training in VR. So the topic that we're going to discuss here would be the future of corporate training, and what role VR would have, in transforming corporate training and making it even better. So we have with us today Mr. Viren, who is the president and CEO of Gyrus, which is AI-driven cloud-based LMS, one of the leading in the world. And we have Taish from WOP VR, and they are the domain leader when it comes to training with virtual reality. As I said, we'll be discussing this topic of the future of corporate training, with VR perspective, and we have a few questions which we'll take one by one. So my first question to you, both Viren and Taish, is that what are the different forms of virtual reality training, right, and how both the organizations position yourselves in the market?
Good question. So if you look at at VR and in the training space, you can roughly categorize kind of VR into two categories by using kind of two forms of the technology. So first being kind of the 3D worlds. So this is really known from gaming, where 3D worlds are being generated and there's interaction possible with that 3D world, which you see a lot in games as well. The other one is really interesting, which is kind of the use of video and 360 video. So meaning that the video, once you put on the VR headset, will be all around you. Specifically, that way of using VR training is super realistic. It doesn't get any more real than video, and very often the time in order to produce these type of trainings is way shorter than using the 3D model type of trainings. So we from Warp VR, we are using kind of the 360 video approach. We combine that with, as how we call it, kind of story-based immersive learning, which we mean where kind of stories are created, interactive stories where you enter, when putting on the VR headset. So each of the VR trainings that is being generated through our technology is kind of a narrative, meaning that a employee who puts on a VR headset can start playing a VR training, then enters kind of a situation, and they have to make choices in that situation. So in case of an evacuation, just an example, you need to make a choice whether you go left or whether you go right. One of them is probably the good answer, leading you all the way up to kind of a branch in that interactive scenario and all the way to kind of a good ending. But things can go wrong as well. And I think that's really interesting when it comes to VR and VR training, where employees can kind of experience the consequences of the choices that they make. So also in that evacuation example, if they would make a wrong choice, what exactly happens? And if you can really truly experience that, we know also from research that the knowledge that you remember, kind of the procedures that you need to learn, you remember them way better when using VR for training. So hopefully that explains a little bit kind of the difference that we see when it comes to the technology implemented for VR training.
Yeah, and from us, when we look at it, it's a good example and overview in terms of 3D and 360 videos, right? As an LMS perspective, when we are looking at it from a market, it's all about giving a flexibility to our customers, right? Especially in what I will call a heavily regulated industry, such as manufacturing, pharma, banking, or government, where compliance is critical, right? And there is a margin of error is very, very little or none, right? Where safety of the employee, and this just takes it to the next level, right? And kind of thinks of it in terms of tool set. So as far as positioning in the market, it's all about giving a flexibility to our customers where they can reach additional trainings requirements to meet those compliance and making sure that they are leading edge from that perspective.
All right. So lately we've been witnessing that the training and development industry is increasingly focusing on the learning experience. Although content is equally important, but a lot of emphasis these days is given to the overall learning experience of the learner, right? So what we are the missing puzzle here for the top-notch onboarding and learning? What do you think about that?
Yes, absolutely. I do think that VR is actually that missing puzzle piece when it comes to onboarding. Maybe also for other types of training. I think obviously there when new employees enter new companies, especially those companies where on-site presence is really important. I do think that VR can have a great attribution when it comes to onboarding. So, one of these examples is, for instance, to have more like a guided tour, and we're seeing that a lot currently with our clients, that they're actually kind of transforming, let's say, the old-fashioned physical guided tour in towards a VR training. So what's actually happening is that that tour is actually being recorded with 360 video camera and being implemented in VR, which has some major advantages. So one obviously is the operational disturbance. I mean, you could imagine that having loads of people walking through your factory floor would give some disturbance in the operation for the people that are currently working there, but also for everybody who gets the onboarding experience. That requires quite a bit of time and resources in order to get everybody through that kind of process. So doing it with VR actually gives you kind of a scalable way in order to get everybody that right experience, maybe actually even a better experience, because you can really enrich that experience with all kinds of ways. Just an example, you could have the CEO of that company doing a little bit of talk in that onboarding process, while otherwise that would definitely be impossible if you would guide everybody through a physical guided tour. But I also think in terms of safety, for instance, we've also seen that with a couple of our clients, that the actual guided tours makes sure that you have to walk through a work site in a certain way. Otherwise, unsafe situations might occur, and that's really something that can be solved with VR, also for that onboarding process. So definitely, I do think it's a really interesting addition, let's say, as a technology to kind of that whole onboarding process.
Yeah. No, you're right, because I think onboarding is so critical, especially with anytime you have a new person in. By the time they become productive, people say averagely it will take 2 to 3 months for them to be more effective, right? And anything that we can do to shorten that cycle, it's a plus, not only for the new employee, but also from the organization. But more importantly, a lot of people leave because if their onboarding experience is not positive, what they are saying is like, oh my God, what I got into it, right? Kind of thing. So I think the user experience and the customer experience are very, very important. And I think, you touched on the safety. Absolutely, because I think as part of the onboarding, anything that we can reduce from a safety and a compliance perspective, especially for employee, they will learn quicker, right, in terms of reducing the cycle time and be more productive, because everyone wants to be productive. Nobody wants to wait 3 to 4 months before they can start touching that equipment or start operating that thing. That definitely, I think, it is that missing puzzle, right, kind of thing, where you sort of bring together all type of things together and make it more effective. And I think it's a nice tool for training and administrative department, as well as from a safety and compliance perspective.
Absolutely, and just to add to that, I think you need to shorten that cycle. I could even imagine you can bring that training, forward into that onboarding cycle even more. Maybe even before, almost in the recruitment process. Like if people really know what they're getting into, like what's the job gonna be like, they're way more prepared. They're way more likely to not. Leave again, so to really finish it onboarding and be really a happy employee in the company and be very productive. So totally believe that.
Absolutely, and I was also reading a report last week, and it was a closed group experiment that a few manufacturing enterprises did at their factories, So they shifted some of their onboarding exercise, from physical and theoretical training to VR, and they saw massive reduction in the onboarding time. So they're from theory to practical to actual implementation. The learning cycle was about anywhere between 2 to 3 months, which was brought down to about 2 weeks using VR. So there is actual reduction of onboarding time and massive amount of efficiency that VR can add. My another question is, for heavily regulated and heavily sensitive industries like healthcare, right? How VR would have an impact, on training and development.
I think there are many industries which can benefit from VR training, and the healthcare industry is definitely one of them. What we're seeing in this industry, there's a major, let's say, pressure on medical professionals in order to perform these procedures under high pressure. There are a lot of procedures these medical professionals need to learn, and they're quite complex, and I think they're getting more complex kind of every day. And most probably kind of the old-fashioned ways of learning, so to say, don't completely cover that complex and the quantity of these medical procedures anymore. So I definitely do think that VR can have a really good place in these VR trainings, can have a major impact there, since VR can make sure that these medical professionals can easily train these procedures they need to perform, and also in a very realistic manner. So again, here I think that's one of the major importance of VR, getting as close to reality as possible. So comparing that to other forms of training, also kind of looking at the school programs these medical professionals are going through. You want to get as close to reality in order for people to really truly understand these procedures, but also to make sure that they can still do these procedures when they are under that same emotional pressure when they actually have to perform them. So emotion, this is kind of, I think, what VR can really bring into the mix is making sure that emotion is part of a training, in order to make sure that these procedures are very sticky and they can be remembered, and the retention, of getting these procedures and performing them in the right way is even better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, in terms of the possible impact of VR, I look at it both from a B2B as well as B2C, right? And I think, we are, in some front, B2C is also adopted. Like, I was looking at Nike in terms of in the retail store, you try to purchase, it's absolutely phenomenal, right? Kind of things that you can go in and you can pick out what you wanted and you can go through that. But it forced them to sort of look at the entire process end to end and make sure that how you can optimize it, right? Kind of things, even in the virtual world, right? So because it not only they are improving their internal, but also the internal and external both processes around that. And I think, when you look at something like defense industry, right? You need to get to as real as possible, but not real, right? If I'm a mechanics, fixing, jet engines kind of things, well, I'm not going to have a, whole bunch of try to fix it, right? I need to get it done in the first time, right?
Exactly.
Same thing if I'm a pilot, right? So that's where you have a, the VR and the simulations and all those type of trainings, and you repeat it over and over again. And I think 1 is effective, 2 is much cheaper to do, and 3 is much safer, and there is no casualty around it, right? Kind of thing. So yeah, absolutely. There are so many places where you can see these use cases where, and I think, it takes time to adopt a little bit, kind of thing. Sometimes we have a mindset in our own, I don't know if it's possible or not kind of thing. But, we are seeing more and more people in this industry, right, kind of thing. And adoption, I think it will just, compound effect. This is what we are seeing.
Absolutely.
Right. So, of course, there are functional benefits and economical benefits of VR, which is reduced onboarding time or improved efficiency and effectiveness of the training. Do you also see any micro level benefits like the increase in engagement or knowledge retention of the learner when they actually use VR? What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, absolutely. And I think there's been already quite some research regarding engagement and knowledge retention. And again and again, actually, this research proves that there's an increase in remembering procedures when they're trained with VR. Actually, we were part of a research, or at least our technology was used in a research with a hospital here in the Netherlands, where they were training a CPR procedure. They were using VR in the research and comparing that to an e-learning. So this was really about the steps needing to perform CPR, kind of the procedure in itself. And what they found, there was an increase of over 40% in remembering this procedure over time. So meaning that when being trained in VR, there's there's way more stickiness when it comes to remembering this procedure than being trained in for instance, in e-learning. And I think it's probably due to the fact that when wearing a VR headset, you're completely in that world. It's going to be difficult to think about anything else. I mean, you're just immersed in that world. If somebody would ask you for a cup of coffee, you cannot respond because you're in that world doing that training. You're fully in there, and that's different with other forms of training where you can always be distracted, for instance. So I think that's kind of one of the reasons that you're seeing that the engagement and the knowledge retention is really high when it comes to VR training.
No, it's a good point, actually. I think if I were to add, I think it's all about also giving a control to the end users, right? They feel like, I can feel it, I can touch it, that experience, going through that is not, is not easy to replace, right? Kind of thing, versus going physical, right? Kind of thing. E-learning definitely has an advantage, but, we haven't evolved that in a long time, right? Kind of thing. SCORM was introduced, a long time ago, right? And now if you look at it, we definitely want to have a level of engagement and giving a control to the end users, right? Also, as I said before, because you are reducing the cycle time, right? Your time to learn is going down, right? And you have undivided attention in there while you are going through that, which is important, right? Easy to learn, and also it's safe and secure, right? Kind of thing. That is also important. Because I think, it's okay to learn, multiple times, and still when you come out of it, you'll have a much, knowledge and the retention as a result of it. Yeah. Good question, yeah.
All right. So talking about the difference between the virtual training and the actual training, right? Of course, when a learner is going through an actual training, in person, there are a lot of soft skills that a learner could learn. Do you think VR would be able to offer that, or do you think it's closing the gap of soft skills very soon in the evolution? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, yes, I think VR can be definitely a part of that. Like, VR is in itself, it's a technology, but I think it's a very interesting technology for people to be able to kind of prepare for anything that might come, right? So it will put you into kind of a realistic environment, and you can train, and you can make sure that you get the procedure right eventually in order to perform it in real life. And I think that this is kind of true for soft skills as well, although, very often soft skills is not really kind of a real strict procedure. It's also kind of, body language. It's also, there's a lot of emotion involved, let's say. However, we do see that soft skills is actually a big part of the training scenarios that are being developed by using kind of our technology. And we see that it's really interesting because kind of the emotion is a big part of that training, right? So whenever we film these type of scenarios, so kind of a sales training or a leadership training, or maybe a training about giving feedback or communication skills. We use professional actors, in order to record kind of these interactive story-based scenarios. And you can actually practice with that. So how do you respond to kind of an aggressive client, for instance? Like, what does it do with you? And what's kind of your primary reaction? And it might not be the best reaction in order to get, the client in, for instance, in case of sales training. So you can practice over and over again until you get it right and you understand kind of the philosophy or the methodology which is behind, those soft skills approach. So what we're actually seeing is that I would say almost half, probably 40% of the training scenarios that are being created in kind of the Warp Studio platform are actually soft skills related trainings. And again here, I think a lot of clients used to do kind of this also with professional actors, but then on site. But what VR can give is actually the scalability. It's easier to train a lot of people in less time, but it also gives you the context. And I think that's really important. And you can practice kind of a client's success in a retail store. But it's hard to practice in an office. You really want to practice it in that actual retail store. So VR can give you that context in order to get closer to that real situation.
Yeah, no, I agree. If you look at it from a USA perspective, from a demographic perspective, you have lots of baby boomers retiring, right? You have a post-COVID situation where number of people in the workforce are kind of going down, right? No matter where you go, and trying to get a basic service is kind of challenging, right? So the big questions on the table is, how do we train the new workforce, right? Yeah. And we can't really use the traditional model, right? Kind of thing. Used to have I'll bring in and I'll just kind of try to do that. That really, because we just don't have that many people, right? Kind of thing. So we need to think out of the box, and I personally feel that one of the tools that will be very effective is, closing the skill gap, is having a tool like VR, right? Because not only you can tweak it, you can modify it, but you can sort of think, hey, go and do that kind of things. And with the luxury, you can even get trained at your home, right? Kind of thing. You don't even have to physically fly there or anything like that, right? Kind of thing. Because working from home, people want a lot of flexibility. So I think, a VR training really, to the point where a lot of the challenges, national challenges, can definitely help alleviate some of the pains that we are going through right now.
Absolutely. And also, it triggers the fact that if you are practicing kind of these skills, especially if you're practicing these soft skills over and over again in that VR training, in that realistic situation, people actually get more confident in order to perform them in real life. There's also, research that is being done showing that people are more confident in order, to close that deal with that difficult client when they had proper training in advance, which actually brought them there. So it also brings, a level of confidence to your employees, which eventually is definitely good for business results.
Right. Yep.
All right, so this conversation is getting, even more interesting. Now, let me ask the $1 million question. Do you think VR will be the future of corporate training?
Ooh, that is indeed the $1 million question. I would say yes. I mean, of course, we're in this space, but eventually VR is a technology which is currently mature enough in order to really be applied within, kind of the corporate training landscape. It's a technology that can absolutely help employees. I mean, this has been proven. There's research. This can help employees in order to be more confident, to be better at their work, and eventually, therefore, be better, employees, which will help, results of the business in itself. There will be other technologies available over time as well, but or other technology, it will improve. I mean, that's also what we're seeing. Kind of the VR technology is improving a lot over time. New headsets are being brought to the market. AR is going to play a crucial role in this mix as well. So eventually, we will go into headsets which are way smaller, which have AR and VR capability, for instance. But that demand for preparing people for, difficult procedures, either way, when it's soft skills, hard skills, or safety procedures or whatsoever, is always going to be required. And therefore, you need to place people into a different reality. So although you're sitting on your chair, maybe you're sitting at home, you need to train people in that realistic environment. And that's always going to be kind of a virtual reality type of technology in order to do so. So I definitely think it's part of that, future of corporate training. There's going to be a mix, different, different training methodologies. VR is definitely going to be one of them. It's going to be bigger, and it's here to stay.
No, I think it's a good question, right? Because, if you asked 25, 30, 40 years ago, right, everybody would say, hey, instructor-led training, where you bring your employee and that's it, that is the best way to train because you have a personal touch, and, and there is some truth to that as well. But then we have evolved to e-learning, right? Everybody thought, watching a video will be boring and we don't want to do that kind of thing. But now obviously people don't think otherwise, right? Hey, we adapted, right? During COVID, webinar, we definitely, was one of those trainings, and everybody was like, jumped on a Zoom call or team calls, and, and they quickly adopted. And I guess the point I'm trying to make is that, as a human, as well as, from a workforce perspective, we are very adaptive, right? I think it just happens that there weren't that many tools in the market, right? You call it investments or etc., right? But I think the new technology, as soon as people see the benefit of it, is it going to replace all other training? No. Is it going to augment what we have? Absolutely. I think there is a tremendous growth potential through it. Like with anything, you don't want to take it to one extreme, but if you kind of combine with different things, I think at the end of the day, you'll have a workforce that is more educated, in terms of with a very robust experience, well aware of safety, right, kind of thing, and more importantly, a repeatable, right, in a more economic way, right? So yeah, absolutely. I think there is a good future for it, and like with anything, adoptions, takes a while, a little slow in the beginning, but once it's caught on, and I think people will, will do that. So yeah, I think there is a bright future in the corporate training.